Good afternoon, everybody. You know that I often talk about the fact that the CTO role changes as the company grows. I have with me here today the fabulous Mark Rogers. Welcome, Mark. Really lovely to have you.
Hi, Adelina. Nice to see you.
Mark and I are going to talk about how the role of the CTO changes after the point that the company gets product market fit. Mark, you've worked for Oracle Advertising and also you have a huge amount of experience in helping scale ups and growing companies acquire product market fit. Can you tell us, for the audience today who perhaps might be CEOs or CTOs of growing businesses, how can you tell you have product market fit? What questions do you ask yourself to ascertain that?
So, there's a sort of series of stages you go through in growing a company. And the very obvious one is, before you have customers, you don't have product market fit. But even after you do have customers, there are these stages you have to kind of check whether you've achieved. And
Mm-hmm.
really, product market fit, there are a few key signs that you've got there. One big one is that whatever you're selling is coming out of a product line. So it's coming out of a budget. And so there's an annual cycle. People know they're going to be spending money on it, and they budget for it. And at that point, people are planning, and you can see then your forward projections in terms of your growth, and you can see how many people within your target ICP, your ideal customer profile, actually have money that they're looking to spend in the current year. There's a variety of other signs too, but that's almost the clincher. If you've got a budget line, you've definitely achieved product market fit. You've got something that people are budgeting for, and you probably know who your competitors are. There are a number of other things which I could talk about at length. But
Before
that
we move
really
on to
means it.
other signs, can you give me an example of a budget line so people get a bit of an idea of what that means for them?
Well, so for example, let's say, so one of the businesses I'm involved with is a carbon database.
Mm-hmm.
And these days, large enterprises, not smaller companies, but large enterprises have a budget for figuring out what their carbon footprint is. Now, that
Mm-hmm.
used to come out of a bigger sustainability pot. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it does. Sometimes it came out of an innovation budget. But
Mm-hmm.
gradually, as that market has matured and as legislation about measuring carbon has come through, you begin to see it appear as its own item. This is the amount we set aside for measuring our scope 3 emissions.
Mm-hmm.
So in any business, you'll begin to see that. And it's a key critical question for the go-to-market side. Where is the budget coming from for this? Because in order to report back to your investors, you need to say to them, look, is this still innovation spend? In other words, it could disappear if times are hard, and we're seeing a bit of that in the downturn at the moment. Innovation spend tends to be one of the first things that gets cut. Or is it under a category that's kind of a little bit frothy? Or is it like, an accepted cost of doing business? And typically you'll be able to tell this in other areas. So for example, is the budget allocated to a consistent department on the buy side? Does it always come out of R&D, or does it always come out of marketing, or does it always come out of finance? Or is it kind of all over the shop? If it's all over the shop, that's a sign that it's immature. How many competitors do you have? How are they getting funded, and so on? So you can also, sheer customer count is also another way of telling it. If you've got fingers of one hand kind of customers, your early stage. But even if you've got let's say a score of customers, 20, what kind of spend are you getting? Are you getting up-down spending? Are you getting spending that's beginning to be somewhat consistent year on year? Are people coming back to you in meetings to say, oh, well, your competitor, you said X, but your competitor is charging us, 25% less than you. Again, that's a sign that the thing's stabilizing. In the early stages of a market, you'll see people having budgets that can vary by 10x. Sometimes 1,000, sometimes it's 500,000, sometimes and that's a sign that people don't really know what you're doing and so on. So as gradually all those things stabilize, you begin to see you begin to see that maturity phase is underway.
So this sounds that for B2C, B2B companies,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, if you have a, if you're marketing yourself to companies that they have either a legal requirement or something that enables their business to succeed, that makes sense. But what about if you're B2C? Um, a how can you tell? What other signs can you tell? Because that sounds very much from the customer side, but are there signs you can tell that you have product market fit? For example, if you have a B2C, you're B2C, let's say you're a platform that sells to hundreds of creative writers.
Well, I think in that case, it's going to be driven by a few things, and this is really in very early stages, because I think if you're invested, so B2C obviously costs more to get to market. Yes. So generally, to bring any kind of consumer-based product to market, you'll need external finance, and so you'll need to jump through these hoops with your early stage investors. When you've just built something and you're trying to reach a consumer market, you'll typically see, if you're only good at marketing and you've got something that is of interest to people, you'll typically see a lot of people visiting you, trying it. Let's say it's a software product, trying it out, and so on. And then at a certain point, you'll introduce premium pricing, and you'll look at your customers and you'll go, okay, well, a certain number of people, maybe they're students, and they don't have any budget, but maybe some people here are consultants in small businesses, or they're in the R&D function in a large org, and they actually do have a budget, and that for those people, let's say they can pay $20 a month or something. So at that point, you obviously introduce a paywall and you start to see a conversion, and typically you would expect to see a conversion of about anything between 1% and 3% of the people who sign up is typical for a B2C product. If you're not seeing those kinds of conversion numbers, if you're seeing 1 in, let's say, 500, you're probably too far away. And so if you're an investor, and obviously I've invested in businesses, and you talk to early stage businesses a lot.
Yeah.
So people will say something like, it's been downloaded X thousand times. Great, but then obviously the challenge is, okay, what's your business model? If you're looking for people to pay, what proportion those people are paying? If it's more of a data-driven play, that it's free to consumers and you're selling advertising, that's a slightly different calculation. And then you're looking at things like, well, attention metrics. Have you got anything you could take to an advertiser that says that people are spending X amount of time on the platform? Because that's, if you like, a second stage activity to build your business case. Does that answer your question, though?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really, so because there's a lot of fractional CTOs, as well. And I want to go back to the point about, how the product market fit angle in a company changes the role of the CTO. But I want to help fractional CTOs because I know they often struggle to understand if they, for their own services, have product market fit. And to my mind, the signs that I was thinking, as a fractional CTO, you'd know if you have product market fit is because you are recognized in a particular industry for a particular stage of business. Those kind of people come to you regularly, asking you the same questions over and over and over again. And they say, and when you ask them, why did you choose me? And they go, oh, because 5 different people referred you to me. And to me, that's a smaller version of product market fit, for a business. But when you're like a fractional CTO, would you say that's a fair assumption? Or what would you say from let's say for a 1-man, 1-woman band?
Yeah, I mean, it slightly depends for any one man or 1-woman band on what your capacity is. And generally, as you say, people know about you. And so that's sort of how many customers can you take, I guess, is one question. Sort of how many conversations do you need to have to get one piece of business in? And that's a sort of number that you probably instinctively know. But the other way of framing it is, as you say, what are you known for? So let's say you are known for the other day, a colleague of mine was hired because they were known for their ability to bring several platforms together. So it was a classic roll-up startup, you know, 3 different platforms, all with slightly different customer profiles in an overall sector. And the challenge was which platform was going to be the winner, how to get the technical teams to talk to each other and trust each other while everybody migrated to the successful platform. And they'd done that already. They were known for that. And that was a kind of word of mouth thing, you know, because obviously that's a fairly normal challenge, I think, particularly in SaaS businesses, that you've got competing platforms, but not that. But obviously, you hear about it more in terms of when it doesn't work than it does, because there's always a huge challenge, particularly with remote working and so on, you know, that location A doesn't trust the engineers in location B and so on. So I guess those are the kinds of things that you have to ask yourself if you're a freelance / fractional CTO, which is like, what am I known for? Or what within my CV makes me employable? And what story should I be telling to the market? And then in terms of, you know, reaching those people, I mean, you do this yourself, producing content that's relevant to that, for example, on LinkedIn or Substack or Medium, that sort of says, you know, typical challenges facing someone who wants to bring 3 software stacks together, you know, and just talking about your experience and so on. And that generally, in the first instance, alerts your own network. You tend not to reach actually anyone outside your network, but people in your network goes, oh, Adelina, yeah, she's good at this, isn't she? Because, you know, there's my investment over here if I'm an investor, or my business over here if I'm a business person. Often the person with those problems is head down trying to solve those problems. So it's often a question of reaching someone who knows that person, who's an advisor or an investor or a contact, to say, you know what, that thing you're dealing with, I know someone who could help you with that. So, and then of course you'll be able to see, based on the response to that content, what kinds of people you're attracting, and what kind of branding, therefore, you should start to project. You know, are you a problem solver for SaaS? You know, SaaS,
SaaS fintech or whatever. I mean, which for me, I think it's really important to know which industry you operate in and where do you actually add value. At what stage of a company do you add value? Well, coming back to the product market fit question, how the CTO role changes. Let's have a look actually at the different types of CTO roles. And when we think about the role of the CTO, you know, a lot of people, you were saying earlier, actually, before this call started, that, you know, I look at so many people on LinkedIn who have a CTO job title, but I don't really think they're a CTO. And that's, you know, that's a very common challenge. You know, people kind of go, well, how are you a CTO when you only is 3 engineers in your business? And how are you a CTO when you have, you know, 2,000 engineers in the business? You know, how can you compare those 2 roles, even though they have the same job title? So, you know, I've split. There's actually 8 CTO roles, but 5 core CTO roles. And if you look at the map where I've split the CTO role in various stages of growth of the business, when we look at before product market fit, obviously, like you said earlier, you're creating a product. And therefore, as a CTO, you have to do everything possible to make sure that product is created, including coding yourself. Correct?
Yeah, exactly. Building POCs yourself, sometimes working with one other engineer, but yeah, it's generally very early stage. So you're probably doing a lot of hands-on stuff, including talking to customers.
Yes, indeed. And then let's say you either get investment or you start getting some customers. But like you say, having customers doesn't necessarily guarantee you have product market fit. It just means that you are getting adding some value somewhere, but it's not necessarily you've hit gold, right? It doesn't mean you've hit gold. But at this stage where you have some customers or some investment, the later stage of business where you have 10 to 50 engineers, the CTO role starts to split up in two in my experience, depending on the person that was that original founding CTO, who was a lead engineer really at heart. And this is where essentially they have to start delivering business goals with technology whilst managing a growing team. It's not just them and one other guy or gal. It's just not them and not just a handful of people working on something. Communication is not an issue. From your perspective, is there any angle with regards to the product market fit you'd like to add in this kind of later stage?
I would say in the very early stage of a business, often the problem is not well understood. So you're looking for the problem. And then in the early stage, when you've got some customers, you've got, if you like, a smaller subset of problems, but they're beginning to swim into focus. And then by the time the CTO's role really is important, because in the early stages, you're kind of a hands-on engineer, really. But in the third stage that you've identified, you've actually identified what you think is a really valuable problem. And then the question is, what's the exact scope of that problem? Which bit of it are you yourselves going to solve? And where are you going to partner? And how do you partner? So the CTO's role there is really important, because you've only got a limited amount, assuming you've raised money, you've only got a limited amount of money, and you've got to place a bet. And the bet is on which is the thing that our team can do in a way that differentiates, in a way that's attractive to our go-to-market partners, because ideally you'll have partners by that stage. You'll have people who maybe solve another bit of a complementary bit of the same problem. And you then can figure out, okay, where do we buy? Where do we build? Where do we partner? And you're really kind of figuring out those decisions and placing those bets and hiring. So you're thinking, okay, well, we need to build an API to work with these partners because we're not doing that bit of it. So, does that help?
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that you have to make a bet, because I think Itzhak Sabo mentioned this morning on a LinkedIn post that as a CTO, you have to learn to make bets, and really good ones as well, because you can't just not commit to something, to launching something. So yeah, we have a comment today from Gavin Reedman, who says, yeah, literally helping a CEO find their ICP, ideal client profile at the moment. LOL. Thank you, Gavin.
Well, and the role of the CTO is super important in that actually, so you often, I was having a conversation last week where there's someone who's taking on a huge challenge, and one of the companies I work with can do a bit of that. And we were saying to them, look, you're doing a lot. We could do this bit of it with you. And to be honest, I don't think that would make you any less attractive to investors. But she's the CTO, but she's also the CEO. And she's thinking, can I afford for this bit of, which is AI associated, can I afford for this bit of what we do, because it's AI associated, to be not done by us? Now, our argument is, well, look, alternatively, you'll go direct to OpenAI and work with those guys, and better to come to somebody who's actually done more of the work than waste your energy building a better interface to OpenAI, because you're not in the business of running an AI model. But it's always a challenge with any early stage business. How much of this do I need to own, in inverted commas, to be attractive to an investor? And then what's my resource? How many engineers can I afford to hire? How much time do I have myself to build really attractive, differentiated IP that is, useful to my customers, valuable to my customers, such that they'll pay for it and support growth and further investment, and differentiated enough that I will survive in a tough market.
And when you, so from my perspective as well, though, Mark, when your company has reached product market fit, the role of the CTO changes from my perspective, because now you are spending your time making sure that this product that you've created that clearly is being bought, because one of the key signs of product market fit is that you are selling it, ideally at scale, right? Before I move on, actually, I'd like you to challenge me if you disagree.
Yeah, the scale depends on what phase you've reached, right? So essentially at a certain point, two things happen in the business. One is the focus moves away from engineering experimentation to scale and questions of scale. So in other words, you're not trying things out anymore. You're making tweaks, but essentially you know what you're doing, and then it's a question of how do we make sure we have enough servers. How do we make sure our distribution partners are technically supported? How do we document our APIs? How do we, who do we hire to do those roles? And your job as a CTO is much more managerial at that point. It's much more, what alerts do we need in the middle of the night? If our servers go down, can we afford to have some kind of automated alerting at this point in our growth? A lot of strategic decisions like that. What kinds of people should I be hiring? Maybe we're still all working remotely. How do I support that? How do I keep morale up? How do I build a team that loves to work together? What do I need to do there, to make everybody gel, through sometimes, people that don't quite fit, or, that I'm worried about, that don't like remote working, or are getting, need a bit of moral support. Your job really at that point is quite different. And from the point of view of the investment and the business as a whole, the bulk of the money being spent, so 10 out of $10, probably, I don't know, $7 or $8 of those $10 are no longer being invested in, the technical side. It's all going in marketing. It's all going in go to market, because that's the challenge. The challenge is, and your CEO will come to you and go, okay, what's the minimum I need to spend to service this huge corporation that I need to sign, because I need to do the maths on what it would take to close this business and make sure we don't fall over in a year's time because we're swamped with calls to our API.
So actually there's a very important point here to mention as well. When so many companies often misunderstand why they have product market fit, and then they start investing in engineering time, for example, in things that are not the thing that's keeping customers hooked. They make an assumption about why they have product market fit. Is there a way to tell that your assumption is wrong, other than the fact that ultimately you start failing when you start investing and changing the product in ways that actually make you lose that product market fit that you had?
Yeah, super question, because you don't really know until you launch a product often. You've got a couple of super keen customers for it because they're bending your ear about it.
Yeah.
And they're early stage customers, and so they have better access to you than the later stage people do. But until you launch things, you don't really know. And it's a challenge because, your existing customers won't necessarily be asking you for this thing. So classic thing, when I joined Amazon many years ago, eBay had suddenly cropped up, and they were, and Amazon, was suddenly putting huge bets on auctions because eBay was the thing. And Amazon auctions was a disaster. It was a complete waste of energy and time. But
Right.
for the time, it was a huge investment that was being made. Maybe we were wrong in doing fixed price. Maybe it was all about auctions. And so companies take big bets all the time and fail. Really hard to know what, and in an early stage that can be fatal. Fortunately, Amazon had enough money for it not to be fatal for them. In an early stage business, the only thing you can do is try and go small. So typically, even if it's don't fully engineer the thing, build a mock-up of it, try and sell the mock-up, try and sell it in the way that you'd sell any other new product. In other words, don't build it properly, sell it as a CSV file to start with. Just see if you can incrementally test demand on it before you bet the farm on doing the full fat version. That would be my advice. Just behave. Even when you're scaling, behave as if you're a startup. Count every penny in terms of new development. Really, really make sure that your customers are screaming for a new feature until you push it. This is all the 37 signals wisdom, from those guys is all about, don't do things just because one customer asked for it. Don't do things because two customers asked for it. Ignore it the first time a customer asked for it. I love that. Because it's like one person it's only when like multiple people are asking for it. This is much more about B2B at scale or B2C, that you might have something. If people are really on at you, if your customers wake you up and bend your ear about something, that's a good sign. But don't try not to do things on a whim. Try not to do things out of out of a hunch. Try and do everything in a data-driven way.
I mean, if you do things out of a hunch, like you say, just create a quick mock-up. Don't spend 10 engineers time on it and get lots of people riled up about it before you actually have any evidence if it's going to work or not. But I think often, in my experience, and feel free to challenge me if you believe I'm wrong, but in my experience, often CTOs assume that the more complicated part of the technology that they struggled to create, that's the one that's special to the customer. When in reality, the customer doesn't care at all about it. And the customer cares maybe something that was actually quite easy for engineering to produce.
Totally. And it's very interesting that, particularly when you come to B2B, the value that's placed on exporting the data into some clunky PDF or onto a PowerPoint slide, which if you're a techie thinks, oh my God, how boring, how dull. But that's when you're delivering the value. And so many of the differentiations that you can build are around that. There was a very successful company built by Oleg Roginsky around text analytics, which was my background back in the day. And Oleg Roginsky realized that people just wanted to export the stuff he was working on into Excel, and nobody else was doing that. And in other words, he just made it possible for the corporate customer to use the outputs on their desktop, in the slightly old-fashioned, let's just see what it looks like in Excel way. Now, the temptation is to ignore that stuff if you're really focused on the engineering end of things, but that's where the value gets delivered, particularly for corporate customers. Can I use this data? Does it go onto a slide? Can I export it and play with it myself?
I've just realized we're almost out of time, Mark. So I want to make sure that we summarize some really key points, the takeaways of this conversation, because I think it's really important. So some key aspects of being able to tell if you have product market fit is the fact that do you get, ideally from a B2B perspective, does your product or your service have its own budget line in the budgets that corporations create? If you're a B2B or companies create, if you're a B2B company, and if you're more B2C, then as a fractional CTO example, for example, are you known? What are you known for? Are you known as a specialist in a particular industry for a particular type of product development? I think those are the key takeaways for me. Is there something I've missed on that side, Mark?
Yeah, no, those are often the headlines. And so a lot of this, so I've got this huge matrix of product market fit, and each of these things is marching in that direction. And at each stage, by asking yourself a question, I have a questionnaire that I use for companies that I work with, you can kind of figure out where you are. And that really ought to determine what you're spending in each area, what your focus is as a CTO, and how you should support the business and go-to-market function.
And then, once you have product market fit, I think in order to grow, and also as a CTO, for you to understand what bets you should be making on engineering, I think it's important to understand why you have product market fit, rather than making assumptions about it. Because just because something was complicated and difficult for you to create technically, it doesn't mean it's the thing that your customers value when they use it.
Yeah, and that's really super hard, because there are all kinds of answers to that question. But I agree. The more insight you have into your customer needs, particularly what they actually, where it actually gets used, the better the decisions you're going to make about where you place your investments.
And I suppose the bottom line of this question of how the CTO job changes when the company gets product market fit. Well, before product market fit, you were focused entirely on creating a product, on creating something to see if people will buy it and how much they'd pay for it and what they would buy. Whilst once you have product market fit, it's more about becoming an executive and scaling yourself through other people, and optimizing things. I think, looking at profit margins and maybe also perhaps byproducts that you can create, offshoot products you create out of the successful product. If you understand which aspects of that product were actually genuinely successful.
Yeah, and I think it's an awful lot about hiring as you grow, and managing. And again, in my early days at Amazon, I remember we were on a delivery for a crucial product, and the technical team leader wasn't in the room, and I asked where he was, and he'd heard about this really good computing student at a university on the east coast of the US, and so he'd flown across to try and recruit this guy to our team. And that taught me a bit of a lesson, which was, the importance of the right hire. That was actually more important. Delivery was pretty important because that was, but the right hire was super, super important, and that becomes an increasing part of their role.
Well, Mark, it was really great having you on the call, and also I think people would love to hear more of your stories, from Amazon or other companies you've worked. I really appreciate you sharing your insights today, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Well, very nice to talk to you, Adelina, and it's been a great conversation. So I look forward to the next time.